Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. This is the March meeting of the Davenport Public Library Board of Trustees. We're meeting in the SCRA room of the Davenport Public Library, Fairmont. My name is Steve Bimming, President of the Board of Trustees, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is roll call and introduction of attendees. Laura Guinness.
Present.
Thank you. Judy Lance.
Here.
Joe Heinrichs.
Here.
Michael Hustedy.
Here.
And I, Steve Immingham, here. Expecting Sylvia Roba and Tom Engelman, but they're not here yet. We will recognize their attendance when they attend. Also with us today is Jeff Collins, our Library Director, Lexi Reiling, Assistant Library Director, Jennifer Williams, HR Operations Manager, Tracy Moore, Development Officer, and let's see, Casey Shipley, Recorder, and Mary McGinnis, our City Council Liaison, and we'll also have a special introduction from Jeff Collins.
So I'd like to introduce you to Joseph Holcomb. He is our newest Facilities Services Supervisor. He's taken over for the role that was filled by both Bianca Sierra as the branch supervisor and also Val prior to that. So he's going to be overseeing all three buildings, supervising the caretakers, the assistant caretakers as a facility services team for a department for the first time with all three buildings. He'll be reporting to Casey, and he is a member of the leadership team, and he comes to us from Davenport Community Schools, where he's been there for a number of years, overseeing a lot of the caretaker and custodial work there. And we're just really excited to have Joseph.
Yes.
Today.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Okay. Moving on then to the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. They have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Judy. Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Laura?
Aye.
Thank you. Judy?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And my own vote is yes. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public with comment. Seeing no one, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is reports and communications. First item there is the Friends. I see that Heidi is not, their president is not with us today. I don't recall what is going on, so we'll carry on from there. Next item under reports and communications are committee reports. First item there is finance. Tom's not here. I don't know if there's anything.
It looks pretty much in line. The only thing I would ask is, are we concerned about the utilities? Or is that pretty much online?
It'll probably be over.
Sorry, what?
It'll probably be over.
Oh,
But we
okay.
really don't have much control over that.
Okay.
The city will just take it out of other funds where we save money, so.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next item is personnel. I know Amanda's not with us today, so we'll carry on. And next item under committee reports is advocacy. Anybody know anything about that? I know Malavika's not with us either, so.
I don't know if it would fall under new business, but can I bring something up my wife saw, or does that work? Or how does that work? Or would that go under new business?
Well, it could, except we don't have it on the agenda, so it's not something we could discuss.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, next item under committee reports, reports and communications is the director's report. Jeff, anything you want to add or emphasize?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Just a couple of things to highlight in my report for this month. The first is in preparation for moving the Richardson Sloan Special Collections Center from the basement up to the second floor. We did make some modifications to the hours that Special Collections is open. So that went into effect on February 26th. So they're now open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 and working on appointment systems for the weekends if possible. And that'll be for the next couple of months until we're able to get that shift. Once that shift is done, we're hopeful that we're actually going to have increased hours in Special Collections. We'll see how that plays out depending on staffing. We did receive verification from Parks and Rec that the community center, the additional enhancements to the property is going to be a multi-sport court. So that'll be exterior on the outside of the building. Will be a new multi-sport court so they can do multiple things with it. Potentially exterior lighting as well, so at night, and then there'll be a little shelter there as well.
That's good.
And that is still on tap to be completed by the end of May, so hopefully the building will be done by this summer. Knock on wood on that. We did ask facilities maintenance to install new can lights at Eastern for the monument sign, and it really lit up that sign great. And so you can actually see the sign now at night. We actually made it too bright, and we bugged some of the neighbors, understandably so. So once we were aware of that issue, we worked with facilities on modifying it. They can actually scale it down and up a little bit, and then they could also look at getting some modified directional additions to those can lights so that it's spotlighted more obviously on the monument sign. So that'd be nice. And when part of the Eastern Furnishings project, we were able to install an ADA self-check. So it's a self-check now that is ADA compliant, which is really great. So in other words, if you're in a wheelchair, you can just roll right up to it and be able to check out your items better. We didn't have that before. So just another improvement to the facility. In regard to community relations, Board President Steve, Emmy, and I did attend the ILA Capitol Day on March 5th, and that was a good event to be at and to meet with some stakeholders and some legislators and talk about the great things that libraries do for the community and for the state. Upcoming events, just a couple of things to bring to your attention. Number one is the boardroom series. So the first series for 2024 is going to be on April 18th from 6 to 7:30. And we did reserve meeting room A at Eastern if any trustees are interested in attending in person. And that will be virtual. And the link we'll share as we get closer to that date as well.
Thank you for setting that up.
For sure. And then also in-service, our annual staff in-service and development day is going to be on Thursday, April 25th from 8:30 to 4. So that means all 3 libraries are going to be closed and staff will be meeting at the Eastern branch for that day. Any trustees are welcome to attend. It's part of training. Just please let Casey know if you are interested in attending so that we can make sure we get lunch orders in and make sure we have enough seating for everyone that might be interested in attending. And at the conclusion of this meeting, I can give a tour for any trustee that's interested in going around Fairmount, behind the scenes, anything else like that. I'm available for that.
Do we need to approve closing the library on the in-service days?
You did.
We already
Yeah.
did that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe that was in September or October.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, good question.
I had the same question. They went, oh, we did that. Nope.
Sorry, I didn't remember.
No, that's okay. It's okay. That's how we find things out. Anyway, also, if we could let the record show that Tom Engelman has joined the meeting. Maybe swing back around. Joe commented on things being pretty much in line and asked about the utilities since they're over the budget. But,
Yeah,
I don't know if you had anything else specifically.
No.
I just wanted to-
you know, we're running right about where, in terms of the year, our budget is right about in line with that, so it would appear everything is running where it should be.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions or comments in regards to the director's report? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, We'll move on. Next item under reports and communications is council liaison. Marion.
Thank you very much. I'll just have a couple of things today. I think you all have seen the multiple notes about the new requirements by the state to send out tax information to people, which is apparently going to confuse everybody. I'm not sure. It is required in their new process of budgeting, and I guess they want people to understand for sure, where their tax dollars are going and all that. So
Is that something the city has to do or the county
I
has
think
to do?
I think the county has to do it,
Okay.
but I'm sure the state's not going to pay for it.
Oh, of course.
It's probably the county's paying for it. So in any case, I haven't seen it. I've seen the response. The levy rate is in Davenport at least is slightly lower than it's been by about, I think, 17 cents. In any case, but it's just part of the new process that was when they last year when they implemented some of the changes to how the cities, how we are all taxed in Iowa, basically. That whole tax thing is probably not done. So the implications for how we pay for services ultimately down the road is still a question. It isn't business as usual, but the city is in process. We will have our budget prepared on time for approval by the council. So we are not in any, it's later than usual, but that's because of this step that the state government, that's now the Iowa code, which everybody gets later on. So, so that is moving forward. And if you ever want to see anything about any kind of budgets, it's all on the city's website. There were the presentations that were done when we did the budget workshops in February, which you attended, I believe, a couple, and you were there, I think, as well. In any case, all of that information that you saw, PowerPoints and the back sheets, everything is there, and it always has been. So very curious about that. And it's multiple years back. It's scintillating reading. The other thing I wanted to let you know about today is where we are in the hiring of a new city manager. This work began, the first meeting was in February. There's been questions about why didn't the city start immediately when the mayor wanted to include new alder people. You can't do that if they're not elected, or if they're not sworn in. And and also the first step is an RFP for the vendor, and I'm part of that. There's council people and there's community people, and it's a widespread group of community people. And so we met in February to, and the person sort of directing this in terms of getting the paperwork out and getting everything out is, of course, our HR department. And so Allison Fleming was there, and so we looked at a timetable. So the RFP we looked over the request for the RFP, which is multi-page. That was sent out, and we ended up, and last week it closed because you had to leave it out for a certain amount of time. And so we had 11 vendors, and this is only the RFP for the vendor to do the selection, or to do the candidate recruitment, not selection, but the candidate recruitment. So that I am now sitting and going through with hopefully other members of our committee, and going through the proposals, and we rate them, and we will come back together on April 3rd. We have a meeting at 11 o'clock to say, okay, which one of these vendors is going to be selected based on, our individual weightings and stuff like that. So I had fun last weekend going through my first pass at looking at all these things. And then, and the goal is to, select the vendor fairly rapidly. I believe the council gets to vote on that. So that's a couple of weeks, right? And then the one cycle, and then they will start their work, and the goal is to have a new city manager in place by September 1st. Right now, our current interim city manager, Mallory Merritt, has been very upfront about not having any interest in applying for this job. So she continues right now to fill that position. So that's what's happening with leadership. We're looking. There is of course an RFP out for the city corporate counsel as well, but this is the first push that we're doing right now. So the people in this round were able to bid for both, but our focus, our job on my committee is looking at the city manager, looking at the vendor for the city manager. And there is a wide range of firms that have a tremendous amount of experience, doing this very thing. They had to provide references, people they had hired through this process, things like that. And so there's several that have a wide variety of that, and some with not so much expertise in that particular area of city government. So, anyway, that's moving forward, and we're all doing that individually, of course. Yeah, but otherwise, things appear to be on track, and hopefully we can move forward with budget. We will go into, we will be coming up on our bonding period, which the mayor, the staff, and the alderman involved with the finance committee went to Chicago. That's where I was on that committee. I was assistant finance chair for first time I was here, first period I was here. And so, they go and meet with all the ratings. This is the bond rating folks. So that happened week before last. So, and that's, so now we start into the period of actually the sale. And so that will be coming up. And this is the typical timing for all of this. This happens. So good, hopefully, fingers crossed for, good sales. So that's all I have today. Unless anybody has anything for me.
Thank you, Mary. Excuse me. Next item on the agenda was just any questions or comments for Mary? Okay. Moving on then, old business. The one item there is discussion of the bylaws. And you should find in your folder 2 copies, one of them that has some yellow markings on it. I'd like you to refer to that one if you would, please. The other one, I guess I would ask that when you leave, maybe you take that with you in case you have some other, well, I guess so you have a copy of the bylaws, but also as we go forward in this process, might give you something to make some notes on or jot some things down. Okay, so as far as discussion of the bylaws, my plan is we'll have a discussion on this this month, and then next month we'll actually have this on as an item for approval. So at our last meeting, if you look on page 1 of the bylaws, in the section 2 under Article 1, in our last meeting, we talked about the public with comment portion of our meeting. And in that, as a result of that discussion, it was, the general discussion or agreement was that we would remove the requirement that people who want to speak make their requests known to the board secretary prior to the start of the meeting. So in other words, if somebody were to come in a little bit late, we would, that wouldn't necessarily mean that we would not hear them. So that's that item. Just perhaps for those who maybe weren't at the meeting when we discussed that, if there's any discussion on that, we can certainly have that now. Okay. Hearing and seeing no comments.
What was the decision?
That we would strike that sentence. Those wishing to address the board must make their request known to the board secretary prior to the start of the meeting.
But it's still in this one.
Yes, it's still in this one, but we're going to take that out.
So they don't have to tell anybody, they just show up. Right?
Yes.
No, my point is it's in the one that you said is the revised one.
Oh, no, I guess if I said revised, I'm sorry, that's what I missed.
Okay.
It's just, it's marked up.
Marked up.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Joe.
I had a question.
Yes.
And these are your bylaws. So if I want to speak, I don't have to tell you, but I have to be here when you get to public comment, right? I mean, if I come in half an hour late, it's passed, you have the right to say, I would assume. It's kind of, because you publish this, so people know what time it starts, what it is, and all that, okay.
You can have them monitored in, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
Correct.
Day and night.
Yeah, and we've talked before, when even, years past about, where should we put this on the agenda? Should we save it for the end? If people want to comment and then stay for the meeting, fine, but if they want to leave, that's fine too, so we've left it up front. Okay, the next item I noted was, okay, and the next item is on page 5, I believe. That one's not highlighted in yellow because I originally highlighted the places in yellow for things I wanted to remember to look at. But anyway, so this one, and actually Jeff was astute enough to notice this this one, and I appreciate that. So the situation is that if, let me get another page here. In section 2 of Article 7, and this is short, look there if you want to, but I'll read it. In the event the president's term on the board expires with the term in office, the president will serve the board as an ex officio, and I added non-voting member, for one more year as immediate past president. But that was my addition to that. So if there's any problem with that, I won't blame that one on Jeff. But I just want to comment while I'm here that I looked up ex officio because I've often thought I knew what that meant. But ex officio, all that means is that somebody has a position. I don't remember all the other definitions, but the example it gave had to do with like the U.S. House of Representatives, and the vice president is the president of the House. And, that's Senate, I'm sorry. And so that's just a position they hold. It's not, it's not, it's not, I guess, vice presidential duty. So anyway, but if you look up the responsibilities of the president of the Senate, it says that they do vote to break ties. They don't vote otherwise, but they vote to make ties. So to break ties. So I stuck in non-voting member because that's what we've assumed that to mean, that the immediate past president would not have a vote. They're basically a consultant type position. So that's why I stuck that in. But the main point of this, and what Jeff pointed out, was it says there that the board, the immediate past president, will serve the board for an additional year as an ex officio member. Okay, so now if you go back to Article 4 on page 5, as Jeff pointed out, that kind of was a little bit contradictory because this section says that the president, vice president, and secretary and immediate past president shall constitute an executive committee whose duties shall be the general supervision of all officers and committees, and they shall exercise such executive powers as may from time to time be assigned them. Then it says the full executive committee may act on emergency matters prior to a regularly scheduled meeting or when an assembly of the full board is impractical. Any action taken by the executive committee must be approved by a majority vote and shall be reported to the full board at its next regular meeting. So there, it kind of implies that the immediate past president, as a member of the executive committee, has a vote. So to try to remove that and again, this is up for discussion, so I suggest a change that would say the president, vice president, and secretary shall constitute an executive committee. And then dropping down to the end of that paragraph, I guess that's a sentence, I would add, the immediate past president shall serve as an ex officio, non-voting member of the executive committee. And so anyway, that's how I would propose to resolve that, maybe incongruity, that's what,
Makes better sense because it says it's two ways.
that's what Jeff was pointing out, and I had never saw that, so. The only other change there was a suggestion to, in the first sentence of the second paragraph, where executive committee is not capitalized, to capitalize it since it's capitalized in the next sentence. And in the first paragraph, I guess I looked at that and thought maybe that was just the establishment of the executive committee and wasn't sure whether that should be capitalized or not. So, getting into the minutia, but anybody, I'm looking for your comments, discussion on that.
Well, using the "and" article as opposed to the article doesn't need to be capitalized.
It doesn't need to be capitalized at all?
And executive committee, that's the general.
Okay,
The executive committee you capitalize.
okay. Okay, thank you. So that I was somehow correct, at least with that piece.
Requires two. It's good. No, I mean, and you're
No, I
consistent.
appreciate that, though.
Well, and you're consistent, you keep that, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that piece? Okay, on page 6, Jeff had also suggested that maybe, since we're in kind of uncertain times, since we're in kind of uncertain times as we've been wading through some of this legislation regarding libraries, or proposed legislation, right now to change our bylaws, it just says, we need a majority vote. So in discussion, we thought that maybe that should be a supermajority, make it a little bit more difficult to change the bylaws if some board somewhere down in the future decided they wanted to do that. Anyway, I guess I just wondered what others thought about that.
Steve, for that one, right now, for a simple majority, it would be 5 people of the 9-member board to change it. And a super majority would change that to 6 people of the 9 to make a change to the bylaws, which are the governing rules for the board of trustees. So the recommendation would potentially increase it, make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more cohesion for more people. On the off chance that you do have a group of people, perhaps 4 people that come in that are really against certain things in the bylaws maybe, and if they can just convince one other person that they've got a majority that they need to change.
Thank you.
Have you considered, since you have 9 board positions, putting the number in? Because the only reason why in a contentious situation, there's questions, and I'm just suggesting this for thought, I don't know what's right. But if you say 6, whether you say you have 8 people on your board right now, nobody is like now arguing, well, is it the board, the standing board? Like if you're down people for some reason, and that happens in contentious situations sometimes, maybe you want to keep a number. You're a 9-member board, but you might be going within a vacancy. So just do 2/3 become 2/3 of 10, of 8, or those kind of games that people might want to play. might be an idea to say, if you have a 9-member board that you say 6 members. I don't know. Does that make sense? Then you really have to,
Think about it.
you really have to, it doesn't allow in a transition sort of suddenly big changes, I guess.
Well, I think the opposite. Because if you go down to 8 or 7, you're still saying 2/3, so you're gonna have to have a super majority.
That's correct. And that's what if you're looking, if your position now is that we like the way the library is running, and, we know there could be storm clouds on the horizon, you want to make it as challenging as possible, not as simple as possible. That's all. I mean,
Yes. Michael?
But our meetings are valid if we have a quorum.
a quorum
So
of
it's
existing
5,
members or a
yes.
quorum of the 9? Is it a quorum of the,
No,
Quorum means 5, currently 5 of 9.
Yes.
yes,
So if it's any regular meeting, which could potentially have only 5 people,
mm-hmm,
then we would never get. Do
Yeah.
we still use 2/3? Do we use a set number, 6? It would never pass because we don't even have 6 people in the room. I hear what you're saying, Marion, and it's a good point, but I don't know what we're trying to accomplish exactly with this.
I guess we're just trying to make it more difficult to change the bylaws.
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
make it from a majority to a super majority, make it just a little bit more challenging to change the bylaws.
But is that of the quorum or of the entire board?
that's
I see
exactly the
what you're
question.
asking.
That's what I'm putting
If
on
we
the
put
table, and I don't
6,
know
that's
the
a whole
answer.
board.
Yeah, so I guess what that would do is, on the plus side, if we're trying to make it more difficult to change the bylaws, and you only had a quorum, and
You can do it. You can't do
The
it.
super majority were 6, you couldn't vote on it.
That's
You
right.
gotta wait till you have enough people.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. That's kind of what I'm saying. But
Yeah, I think there's some validity to requiring a 2/3 vote. And it maybe should be specified that it is of the whole board. Because, years ago, like, for example, the US Senate, under their filibuster rules, it was, 67, which was 2/3 of the 100. Then they reduced it to 60, and then there was been a question about reducing it to 60% of the members present.
yeah,
And so there's a difference,
Yeah.
how you define that.
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
As
Like,
members present is.
figure out what your goal is, and is it members present? Is it, if you may be a 9-member board, but somebody may resign and you only have 8. And this happens particularly in times of controversy.
Yeah.
People go, I'm not doing it,
Well, and that was the thing I was gonna mention, as we discussed in a previous matter, when we were talking about having a code of ethics. The fellow on the webinar from the state library said, if you think you wanna adopt something like this, it's best to do it when everybody's getting along, because when they're not, it isn't gonna happen.
I think maybe what Marion's getting to is going back to Article 5, where you're talking about amending by a 2/3 majority vote.
Mhm.
You would say 2/3 majority vote of
The entire
the
board.
entire board.
Yeah, that might
You want to
get you there
specify
too.
right there
Mhm.
that it's not a quorum, it's of the entire.
Yes.
It's like
We
we
have to
couldn't
wait
do
till-
that.
So we have to wait till the whole board shows up to vote on it, right?
No,
Well,
no,
you'd
it
have
just
to
has
have
to be.
6 of 9.
Right.
A lot of times we have 5 because we need to have 5 or we can have a meeting.
Right, but if only 5 people showed up,
You
then
can't
you
vote.
couldn't
You
vote
can't
on
vote
it.
on the change, which maybe is the case. If it's changing something that dramatic, you've got to have, people need to have their, panties in the seat, right?
So, are 2/3 of the,
2/3 majority vote of the entire board.
okay, but what about just saying 6?
No,
You don't
I
think
would
so?
just say
Okay.
the entire
That's fine.
board,
Okay.
because you have the occasion where, for some reason, somebody's gone, and you only have 8. So it'd be 2/3 of 8, instead of 2/3 of 9.
Gotcha.
Hey everyone, I'm sorry, I've got to drop off. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, Thanks for your time, Laura, appreciate it. Okay. 2/3 majority vote of the entire board.
Right? You specify it right there.
That's good. That'll do what I'm,
Board
that'll get to one.
of the entire board. Okay. Any other comments on it? The discussion. Thank you, Darren. Okay. Next item, it's just kind of a cleanup thing on page 7. In that particular section, it refers to us as board members, and throughout the rest of the document, we're not referred to as board members, but trustees, so that's just kind of a cleanup item there.
So if you want to change it under Article 7 as well, in terms of, it says board members,
Oh, yeah, the title of it.
Terms of trustees
should it be in terms of trustees?
rather than terms of board members.
Yes, thank you. It's always the one in capital letters that you don't see. Okay. That is all I'm aware of right now. Is there anything anybody else may have seen that they thought we should address? Okay. What I would ask then is, as I mentioned previously, the other copy that was in your folder that Casey had put in there prior to me stopping by early this morning and dropping this off, asking me if she could make copies of it for me. Running a little behind this one. So if you would, take that, in order to have a copy of the bylaws for your glove box or wherever you want to put it. And also, but, if you have anything else that comes to mind that you think we might want to fix in our bylaws or change, you can use that as a document to jot those thoughts on. If you do, if you can let me know in the next couple of weeks, and then I could turn it around and get it back out so we can at least have people be aware of it before the next meeting. That being aware of any changes that someone else might have suggested, and we could be aware of those and have some thought process on them before we vote at the next meeting. So this will be on the agenda for the next meeting. One thing that also was considered was, since the Iowa legislature is talking about striking gender balance requirements, thought was maybe just add that to our bylaws so we could maintain gender balance here. But it ends up that we don't really have any control over that because we don't pick the trustees. The mayor appoints them. So, and I don't know what the current legislation has, if that would allow mayors, in our case, any discretion on that, or whether it commands them that they cannot consider gender balance. And I think that might be the case. I tried to read through that bill, but it's kind of like, it's not the whole thing marked up. It kind of jumps back and forth between existing state commission items in the code, and so it's hard to keep track of who they were talking about. So
So we'll have to
Anyway.
wait and see what
yeah,
happens.
so whatever it is, that wouldn't do us any good to put it in our bylaws anyway, because we have no control. Okay. So nothing else on that?
Trying to have balance of volunteers could be a difficult situation anyhow.
That's true, yeah. And that's one of the arguments in the legislation that's been moving around is that, we may have the greatest prospect ever, but we can't put them on the commission or committee because they wouldn't fit in the gender balance. So. Okay. Next item on the agenda is new business. And the first item there is a motion to approve changes to the meeting room policy. And I just wanted to point out that it's been my goal to handle new business items and such that we would discuss them at one meeting and take action on them in the next meeting, give everybody the time to kind of think about them. And so in this case, and also in the case of one we approved last month, these are kind of something we need to fix now because there's been some situations where there's been some areas of discussion or conflict. Conflict's too strong a word, but anyway, areas that have arisen in the existing policy that we need to fix. So anyway, with that in mind, want to say a few words about this, or should we just dive into it? Or?
Yeah, do you need a motion to discuss first?
Yes, thank you.
I make a motion to approve the changes in the library, the meeting rooms policy.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joey. So we have a motion and a second to approve the changes to the meeting room policy. Now, is there any discussion? Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So included in your packet, there is a memo that provides some context as well as a red line version of the policy. We're asking today that the board approves motion to make changes to the meeting rooms policy as discussed. So there's been some confusion since November when we updated the policy, and that policy at that time allowed businesses to use the library's meeting rooms. Prior to that, they were not allowed to use the meeting rooms. So in particular, several nonprofit organizations have expressed concern that they are now expected to pay use fees when they have a meeting that's closed to the public. And the intention with the policy change was not to charge nonprofits, but rather to open up meeting room use to more members of the community. So this is an issue only when nonprofit groups state that their meeting will be closed to the public. And the library has historically required meeting rooms to be available for anyone to use, even if the group wanted to hold a private meeting. That is best practice, and it's in line with our role as a limited public forum, except in circumstances in which a library allows private groups to rent the room for private meetings, which is also best practice. So we're recommending the striking the statement that are free and open to the public, and then eliminating number 7B, meetings that are closed to the public or restricted to members of a particular group, will now allow nonprofits to use meeting rooms for free, even when the group wants to hold a private meeting. So this change will also remove a friction point and ensure that staff don't have to police when nonprofit groups are holding private versus public meetings. And our real concern is providing space for the community in a fair and equitable manner, ensuring that we provide uses that are open to the public on a non-discriminatory basis. So administration did verify with the State Library of Iowa that there's no legal requirement for the library meeting room reservations to be open to anyone from the public, just a matter of policy. And this is also in line with ALA's, the library's legal answers for meeting rooms and displays, which supports that decision. So that's our recommendation. I don't know if that fully makes sense. Historically, we have always said that if you hold a meeting, it has to be open to the public. And historically, that's not been an issue. Now it's become an issue because the way the policy is written, they would have to pay a fee if they want to keep that meeting closed to the public. So this change would rectify that and make it so that they wouldn't have to pay a fee. So nonprofit groups can continue to use our meeting rooms free of charge, which was the intention all along. And then there's just another minor change clarifying that the meeting room fee is $25 per room. So it's $25 per hour per room. So in other words, if somebody wanted to use this room, it's $25, and somebody wanted to use that room, it's $25. And if you merge them, it's $50. So it's not just $25 total, because they're taking up two slots that could have been used for somebody else. And then the final change would be number 10, just changing the word to an adult instead of someone at least 18 years old. Pretty less wordy.
No, thank you. I think those are good changes because, it always did seem kind of odd that, somebody could have a meeting and not, who knows who might wander in. But anyway, so I did have one question in item number 12. On the second page. The sentence that says if a meeting is canceled, the group is responsible for canceling the reservation at least 24 hours in advance, unless the room is being booked the same day. Is that contingent on them getting a refund if it was a group that had paid?
Correct.
To pay?
Yeah, that would be important if there was a fee charged.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Yes, Michael.
I'm looking at point 7, and it seems to be addressing prohibitions for wrong. And does it mean only commercial? Because, for example, point C, meetings for products or services are promoted or sold. I'm thinking of the Randalls, for example, Brundles, who are a nonprofit filmmaking organization. If they were to come to the library and share their film on the Forest Grove School, and in the back of the room, they had a table set up with some of their films which are available for sale. Now, as a nonprofit, we would probably allow them to use the room to show the film and get public input. But if they're selling their films, do we have to charge them a fee of $25 an hour?
Yeah, that's a good question. Technically, that's the way that the policy reads right now, is if anybody were to sell a product inside the meeting room, they would have to pay a fee.
Even though they're a nonprofit.
Correct.
Is that what we want? Or do we want to shield nonprofits? I mean, it's unlikely that any nonprofit's going to come in and try to make a lot of money. They're doing it sharing what they do. So I'm wondering if I don't know, Jeff, what do you think about that?
That's a tough one because this also addresses other issues. For example, if I'm an insurance agency and I want to come in and offer a free public event using the meeting room on here's what you should know about insurance. And then I also try to sell my product at the same time, it becomes a little bit of a gray area for us. And we don't want to get into the habit of policing the nuance of each individual room, so I'm not sure.
In that case, that is a profit-making group, and they're selling services, so clearly they would pay $25. You could, this is getting awkward, but you could add meetings of profit-making groups or businesses where products or services are promoted and sold, and then then the not-for-profit should be okay, because you tagged, you said meetings of profit-making groups or businesses, and this is duplication, I don't like it, but meetings of profit-making groups and businesses where products or services are promoted or sold. So if you do that, then a not-for-profit could sell things.
Right.
We don't say you can't,
So
because we said, if you are this kind of person in selling, then you still pay the $25. Or you could say meetings of profit-making groups or businesses, whether or not products or services are promoted and sold, and that covers you too, right?
Yes, and I think this would also impact, in addition to C and B, D and E as well.
Say what?
D and E,
Mm-hmm.
because those are
Yes.
what it sounds like you're describing a similar situation.
Yeah, because you might have a not-for-profit asking for donations. Yeah, you're right, and maybe you could strike that one then, right?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking too. If you had a nonprofit group that was, as part of their presentation, was requesting donations.
So this is a good question for the board to consider. Let's say a hypothetical Girl Scout group wants to come in and use a meeting room to sell their cookies as a fundraiser, and they're a nonprofit. Would that be something that the board would prefer, that there's no fee for them, or that they do have to pay the fee? Because that would be one example that I think would be pretty appropriate.
Yeah, sort of like what Muriel was saying, if we make a demarcation between for-profit organizations and non-profit organizations. For-profit organizations are paying the $25 fee, regardless of their activity, whether it's public information or they're trying to sell a good or service. They're gonna pay a $25 fee. They're a for-profit organization.
Because they're.
They got money. Non-profit organizations would not, regardless of whether or not they're vending items. And again, Girl Scouts with Girl Scout cookies, or Grundles with their films, or any other group. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I'm agreeing with you, questioning about nonprofits paying what they're selling. I mean, the Girl Scouts, for example.
Is there a nonprofit organization that we're aware of that would be unscrupulous in the way it's trying to pull money out of people?
A church, some churches maybe. I don't know how you deal with that.
Do they come to the library and use the library?
I have no idea. I was just trying to think of, I'm just,
We have
I'm agnostic on this. I'm just.
Thank sale.
You know, part of the issue is if you look at item 7, where it starts spelling out what is considered commercial. Item D, meetings where money is collected through sales or donations. I mean, that would hit your Girl Scout selling cookies. That would hit your group
Same with E.
having a movie night and then trying to sell, incidentally sell
Tickets.
copies of their movies.
Same with E, with the fundraising.
If we agreed that everything under 7 refers to for-profit organizations, E is problematical because we tossed in the library, which is a not-for-profit. But I guess it's just the way.
Didn't we go through this last year too?
Sounds familiar.
Yes, we really did struggle with this one.
Yeah,
What was
I
the
know.
decision last year?
I think what we have here, this is what we boiled it down to, but we're back kicking this can down the road again.
No, we're gonna fix it this time, Joe.
Well, you could say, okay, include all this stuff and say, if you're for profit, it's gonna cost you $25 an hour. If you're not for profit, maybe you do charge them, $12 an hour or something. Maybe they do, maybe there is a charge.
If it reverse what you just said, but yes, I agree.
Does that make, yeah,
If you're a for-profit, you're going to be charged.
so what you guys have to decide is, do we care if not-for-profits are raising money? Do we care if they're raising money in our rooms? And I don't know the answer to that. That's your answer.
And even, okay, a nonprofit rents a room, you don't know if they're gonna sell something or not, do they have to say, oh, by the way,
Well, that would be when they signed off on the room. That could be part of your application to book the room, but you guys have to decide whether,
Well, I think the way to do that would be then C would be meetings where products or services are promoted or sold by profit organizations, by for-profit organizations. Fundraising, that's considered a nonprofit event, isn't it? Generally? So I wouldn't worry. So
Well,
I think you strike that out completely.
It would be very difficult as a commercial entity to be asking the public just, hey, give me money. I mean, That's what nonprofits do.
Right.
So is there,
From this line of questioning, I'm thinking you almost would strike E completely. And C, you would put as promoted or sold by for-profit organizations or entities.
well, could we, would it be possible just to make number 7 specifically, change that just to say that it's for, it relates to profit-making groups or businesses, and would we be comfortable with just ignoring nonprofits and they can do whatever they want to do? And that's my question. Do we want to say, do we want to leave it that way? And then have another item for private parties and celebrations. Maybe that's number 8, and then everything else moves down.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, and you could do, there's an hourly fee of $25 per room, do the day for the following, for meetings of profit-making groups or businesses or private celebrations or parties. Those are the 2 you want to charge for. Then you can see how it goes, and if it's not a problem or it becomes a problem with not-for-profits, you could say, change it again.
Change it every year.
You could charge people for a private party, charge meetings of profit-making groups or meetings or events of profit-making groups or businesses. And you don't even have to talk about whether they're selling stuff or not, because you've already charged them the $25 an hour. Those are the 2 that you are like, okay, yeah, we want to charge people for this.
So based on that, it would start out with 7, would read just as it is, and then it would say for meetings of profit-making groups or businesses and private celebrations or parties.
Maybe.
And then B, C, D, and E would be essentially eliminated. If that's the direction that the board wants to go.
Would you read that again, please, Jeff?
Yeah, there's an hourly fee of $25 per hour per room due the day the room is used for the following uses considered commercial by meetings of profit-making groups or businesses and private celebrations or parties.
And we do talk about nonprofit groups up at 6, so we actually cover ourselves there, so.
Just a question on that. Does the word commercial in there? So just assume a profit-making group comes in and says, well, we're going to have a meeting, but it's not for commercial purposes.
Yeah, then you're right, that we could just drop, if we're going to eliminate that, we drop that first part too.
Then pick up with
Is
A,
used
profit-making groups or businesses.
Yep.
Following uses by profit-making groups or businesses.
For my colleagues, are there any concerns that you can think of from the library's perspective in regard to C, D, and E? I believe D and E have long been in the policy.
It's fine to me because it makes it clear that nonprofits are here and for-profits are over here.
It's a little clearer.
And then it
Yeah.
takes the onus off of library staff from having to try to police.
Decide, right, yeah.
Because really our ultimate goal is to provide the meeting room space for everybody in the community equitably.
I like the way you've done this, simplified it. So I have just one other question.
Sure.
Back to
No,
6.
please.
Back to 6. No, just because I'm looking at this. For nonprofit, not-for-profit groups and organizations, I can think of many of them in the community, right? Some of whom are 501c3, some of whom are not. So if Steve and I decide that we're going to put together a nonprofit organization selling magic copper bracelets and we tell the library, well, no, we're not for profit. We're just gonna do this, and if we make a lot of money, we'll contribute to some local charity, maybe.
The library, maybe.
How do we determine what's a not-for-profit or a nonprofit organization? If it doesn't have 501c3, what's the determination?
I
Well,
think
a lot of nonprofits don't want to jack around with all the requirements to be a 501c3. It's very labor intensive. So, a lot of dad's clubs organizations, the different schools, they didn't want to mess around with it. So they would not get 501c3 status, but they were definitely not for profit. So, 501c3 is one way to show you're nonprofit, but it's not the only way, I guess is what I would say.
The advantage of 501c3 is that anybody who gives to a 501c3 can deduct it on their income tax.
Yes, otherwise you cannot.
But otherwise you cannot.
But also 501c3s have to file 990
Right.
with the IRS, and those who aren't, don't.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. That's tough.
So,
Because in your example, you and I formed this business, it's nonprofit. I could say that's not the way we planned it. That's just the way it turned out.
Well, and I
That's
mean,
what happened.
and somewhere, maybe there's a judgment that the library has that if you find someone doing that, you go, you're not welcome back. What's that? Reserve the right, whatever. I mean, yeah, there are many like neighborhood groups. Our neighborhood is a 501c3, but a lot of neighborhood groups aren't, and they might want to have a meeting and they might want to have a bake sale.
exactly.
Yep.
You should allow them, right?
So,
So to that point, Marion, maybe we need to clarify number 12 and add a sentence stating if somebody is misconstruing themselves as a,
yes.
or gives us some teeth.
Mhm.
Is there any other way to differentiate a nonprofit? I mean, I guess you could say, do they have a business license? But I don't know, that's.
You can make it as difficult as you want.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, and basically we're arguing about a $25 fee or not.
Yeah.
It's not whether or not they're allowed.
Let's pass that
We're saying they're allowed to use the room. We're saying whether or not we're going to argue over $25. I think we've just wasted $200 trying to figure this out.
Yeah. But the other thing we're trying to do though is to remove the decision-making responsibility of the staff.
Make it easier for staff, right?
Because the only way we could, if we were to require a 501c3 nonprofit, for example, then we would require documentation and they would have to give us something. And we do not want to do that. We think it's working really well the way it is.
We also have a lot of homeschool groups, study groups, things like that would never be eligible for that, who do currently use our meeting rooms frequently.
How about we put in a line until Jeff says you can't?
For 13.
Is there is it possible that we could, this is gonna sound crazy, that we could have a list, Dad's Club, Girl Scouts,
So,
homeschool associations?
Oh, that would go on.
That'd be, yeah.
Searching for an answer.
so what we're trying to do is but you don't want to make a rule that's going to make it hard for the 99.99999 people that are, either for profit, legit, paying the money, or not for profit, so you don't want to make a rule. So how do you deal with that little annoying tiny people that might try to get around the rule? And that becomes discretion of maybe, I don't know if there's something arbitrary that says, reserves the right to refuse. I don't know if you can. I don't know if that's a bad thing, but.
There was people where you would have a room,
Right.
charge money for it, I mean.
Adding at the very end, maybe at number 14, groups that show a pattern of reserving meeting rooms and then violating the provisions can't be denied.
Yeah, not making use of room or violating provisions of this agreement, of this policy. Yeah, something like that.
I think that would solve it.
And then you've got,
But then other than that, maybe we just say nonprofit and leave it at that.
Yeah.
And then add that on the end.
Got that?
That's.
We think.
Well, this is not the first time we've modified that. Or the bylaws.
and it's shorter this way, I think.
Yeah.
Only
So,
a couple years now.
okay, so now we have a motion. How do we encapsulate this amendment?
It's to you, Tom.
So,
I think that moves to you, doesn't it?
so maybe,
With changes as discussed.
Yeah.
okay,
I move to approve the meeting's policy change, because I need the original.
yes,
As amended by discussion.
yes.
I guess that would, and I'll just add a caveat to that. I would just assume that we get all done. They'll just distribute to us the new policy.
Yeah.
So we can all see.
We'll have that for, oh no, that's right.
It's
Yeah,
not
this
to
is-
approve it, but
Yeah.
just to make sure we see what he said.
Oh, of course,
That's
yes,
a good idea.
okay.
Second.
Joe, second, you're okay with that also? Okay. So we have a motion and a second, which have been amended and okayed by the motioner and the seconder, to approve the meeting room policy. I'll call for the vote. Laura's no longer with us. Okay. And in my head, we step up one. Yes, we do. Okay, so I'll call for the vote. Judy,
Yes.
Joe, Tom,
Yes,
Michael,
Yes.
and my own vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you all for that. That was a good discussion. Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion of the electronic resources use policy. Is there someone? Okay. I know I brought one with me.
Do you want mine?
No, I have one. But I have one marked up. Not marked up, but brought from home. Yes. Okay, so. This was previously the electronic resources.
Steve, did you want to ask for a motion to discuss?
No, we don't need a motion to discuss it.
Okay. Do you want me to share some information about
Yes,
it?
please.
Okay. So included in your packet is a memo and two versions of the policy, the current version and then a red line version. The recommendation from staff is to discuss for first consideration at this meeting. A little bit of background, the electronic resources use policy was established in 2011 to address access to electronic resources on the internet, primarily using library computers. So there are quite a bit of changes to clarify this policy and to make it a little bit more current. I'll go through one by one so that we're all on the same page. Number one is to change the title from electronic resources use policy to internet and computer use policy. And that is to more clearly articulate what the policy actually addresses. And that change also aligns with best practices and the state accreditation requirements. Internet use is one of the required policies. We've been in compliance with that because it's basically the same thing, so it's just nomenclature. Changing the term users to patrons throughout the policy. That's just for consistency across all board-approved policies. Adding a sentence to the policy to address wireless use for the first time. When this policy was initially passed, that wasn't a capability, so it is now. Number 4 is changing the statement mandating that the library provides computers to children and teens to may provide computers. And that is to free up staff to allocate resources based on patron use. So a recent example of that was we removed the teen computer from Eastern because of incredibly low usage. And now there's not a dedicated teen computer at Eastern. But the way the policy reads is that we have to provide that.
Can I ask?
They can still use the
Could I ask,
computers.
when you have a teen computer, does that have age restrictions on?
No, good question. We'll get to that a little bit more too, but basically that is a computer designated for their use.
Okay.
So in other words, we want to make sure that adults don't use that computer or children don't use that computer, that it's meant for that age group.
Okay.
Number 5 is clarifying that parents and guardians are responsible for monitoring their children's use of computers, and that's just in line with all of our other library resources. We removed the paragraph regarding official records custodian and subpoenas, since that information is already addressed in the confidentiality and privacy policy. We don't feel we need to have that addressed in both places, because then we'd have to update both policies at the same time. So that here now just makes a reference over to that policy. Added a statement that clarifies library staff will manage access to computers in line with relevant policies which are now actually listed. We removed the bullet points regarding illegal acts, since those are addressed elsewhere in the policy and or they're covered in the behavior policy. We sync the ramifications for violating the policy with the current behavior policy. We added a statement that the library does not filter internet content, and this is an important point of discussion for today. The Library Board of Trustees is the governing authority for the library, should make that determination on library staff. And I included a link to internet filtering and interpretation of the library Bill of Rights. I said it was included board packet, but I forgot to get it in the board packet, so I apologize for that. That was my fault. A couple of things about filtering the internet. The library has historically, we have not filtered internet access. Most libraries that do use filtering software take that action to be in compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act, or CIPA, and that requires that you have to have some type of software in place in order to receive certain federal funding, and that's not applicable to us because we don't receive E-rate funding. If filtering is required, there would be an unbudgeted cost in terms of annual software fees and staff time to research, purchase, install, configure, and monitor that software. And then there would also be a daily monitoring where costs associated in terms of staff resource, because we would have to provide assistance to computer users anytime they want to override a block that shows up. And then finally, there's already a state law in place that specifies it is illegal to display obscene material where it could be viewed or seen by a minor. So those are some proposed changes to the new internet computer use policy. It's a lot in here, so it's a lot to take in and discuss and think about.
It's an item that we are shielded from, exempt from, whatever the right term is, as far as things that could be viewed or seen by a minor.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
There was proposal to remove this in the current legislature. There was a legislation proposed that would remove our protection from that sort of thing.
Correct, yeah.
As far as books on the shelf that.
Yeah, currently, what you're referring to is the law that specifies obscene exposure to minors, and then there are some ramifications involved with that, consequences, including, I believe they wanted to change it from just a misdemeanor to an aggravated misdemeanor, and then also make it the person have to register as a sex offender. So those were changes. But currently, the obscene policy has a carve out that makes an exception for educational and public libraries, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to provide a lot of materials that we do for the public. To be clear, we don't have anything that is obscene. We don't have anything that's pornographic in our libraries, but there is the definition of what's obscene to one person is very different than to another person. And so there is what's called the Miller test that through the courts is just kind of try to define what that is, but it really is a community standard. And if that were to go away, that exemption for public libraries would have ramifications on us.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, that legislation has moved forward though.
I mean, just a common thing, you probably could have an encyclopedia.
Sure. Yeah.
So do we need to take action on this?
No, this is just for discussion, but as I read through this before, yeah, I didn't see anything that seemed really unusable or something I had any serious question
That will come up next month.
about. Yes.
Okay.
For approval next month?
When I read through this, when documents were sent out last week,
Mhm.
and I'm not quibbling with anything, but I just have a question. This is near the end. The library reserves the right to end a computer session at any time, for any reason, period. And for me, whenever I see for any reason, that's a red flag. Now, I know that you are two good people, and you wouldn't arbitrarily just push somebody off because you don't like the clothes they're wearing. But it does say for any reason. Is there a reason to have for any reason in there?
We could eliminate for any reason and just say at any time, or we want to further clarify it for any time. Because the circumstances in which that would arise would usually be someone's looking at something that is obscene and we would have to shut that down. We might also have to end a session earlier, perhaps if we're closing the building early. We have to evacuate for some reason, or there's an early closure because of severe weather. That would be a circumstance that we would then close or end the session early as well.
Do you understand, Mike?
I do, yeah.
No, I do too, I
yeah,
think about it, because it's
Yeah.
not, I mean, we can all sit around here, and we all know that, you wouldn't just go up and kick somebody off, but
Why not?
that's not what policy says.
I mean,
And the person doing that would have to feel, okay, I have the authority to do this. You've got to make the person who's enforcing, like if I were watching incredibly graphic violent stuff on a computer in a library that might be seen by children, that's not pornographic, but, people being lined up and shot or something.
Well, and this also addresses me coming in with my tablet, right? And linking into your, correct. So that's where the big difference is if you come in and you're watching something that's not approved, that's what all of this is about right now. Not necessarily the computer use, which they do have control of, but when you come in with yourself. Teletubbies.
would replacing for any reason with
Any good reason?
for cause or something like that, which explains that there is a reason for it, which one can justify by looking at the rest of the policy, as opposed to what is sort of arbitrary for any reason.
Any reason
For cause
envision
versus any reason. I don't know. Here again, I really defer to you and your staff because you're the ones who think of this every day. I don't want to tie your hands at the same time.
No, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think we just need to find some language that would address that.
How about just the first part of the sentence, reserves the right to end the computer session? a computer session.
Yeah.
Leave out the time and the reason and
You
the
know,
end your
you wanna-
session,
That
but
sounds great. That's a great solution, I think. One other thing is I would encourage you to click on that link that's included in the board packet in this memo for internet filtering, or do a search on that. And read about that so you can have a little bit more information to make an informed decision next month on whether or not you want to try to implement filtering or if we're good with the status quo.
Sorry, where's that link?
It's on the,
Thank you.
on the back page of the memo.
We, to be clear, we did receive one complaint from a patron, I want to say a couple of months ago, maybe in the fall, about their concern that children could be looking at inappropriate images or on the internet. And we address it like we usually address with behavior policy. If we're aware of something, then we'll address that behavior as a violation of behavior policy. Okay.
Moving on then. President's comments. A couple of things out there that we, I guess, brought up. I brought up the last meeting, the one before that, things to maybe think about for the future, and those are election of officers, how that's done, and the director's evaluation. Obviously, nothing to talk about now, but may bring those up at one of our next meetings before the end of the fiscal year. So, just, some thoughts on that? Might be thinking about those things. So I guess if there's nothing else, we have board training. Going to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so Casey's going to be pulling up a brief PowerPoint slide that talks about river share libraries.
sure.
And that's okay. While she's working on that, I'll go ahead and just start talking about the topic for today. So Davenport Public Library is a member of the River Share Libraries Consortium, which uses the Polaris ILS, and ILS is an integrated library system. Innovative Interfaces Incorporated, or III, or Innovative is the company. They're owned by Clarivate, and they provide the software that allows us to accomplish some of our core functions in terms of issuing library cards, cataloging items, and handling materials. All right. So the mission of River Share Libraries is to provide optimum access to member libraries through resource sharing, including an ILS, delivery, and governance. A little bit of the history of River Share. The River Share Libraries Consortium is based on a long history of library cooperation in the Quad Cities. Nearly 60 years ago, several local libraries formed Quad City Libraries in Cooperation, or Quad Link, to start sharing items. In 1967, the Illinois Library System Act established library systems to promote the sharing of library resources through delivery and automation. And as a result, the River Bend Library System in Coal Valley was established. The Quad Link system was an early and unique model of cooperation across state lines, and River Bend provided services to a mix of public, academic, and special purpose libraries from the Iowa Quad Cities and the Illinois counties of Bureau, Henry, Rock Island, and White In 1986, the group introduced the computerized quad-link catalog, which made it easier to search the holdings of member libraries. And then in 2004, the text-based catalog system was enhanced with an upgrade to a web-based catalog, now using the Circe Dynex product. And then at the same time, Illinois Library Systems started a process of consolidation and mergers. So they merged Riverbend, Heritage Trail, and Rolling Prairie Library Systems, and that created PALS, which is Prairie Area Library System. In 2007, the Quad-Link catalog was renamed Prairie Cat. And then in 2011, that's really the start of the current version or iteration of Rivershare Libraries. So further consolidation of Alliance, DuPage, Metropolitan, North Suburban, and PALS, all of those systems created Rails, which is reaching across Illinois library system. And then with the additional pressures of that statewide system, several of the local Illinois libraries in the Quad Cities realized that they faced a potential loss of that cross-state library material sharing. And so to maintain that unique Quad Cities character of that widespread reciprocal borrowing, 20 area libraries representing 30 locations formed Rivershare Libraries. And then 5 years later, the Illinois libraries left. Yeah. So they joined Rails. One thing to note, though, is that Davenport Public Library, and that's unique among the member libraries in Rivershare, we're the only ones that signed reciprocal borrowing agreements with several of the Illinois public libraries in the Quad Cities. So that currently is Rock Island, Moline, and East Moline, as well as River Valley District Library, that's in Port Byron, the Robert R. Jones Public Library District, that's in Coal Valley, and the public libraries in Sherrod and Silvis. So that's currently a brief history on where Rivershare was and where it got to today. So today, our member libraries, Rivershare Libraries consists of 9 public and community college libraries, representing 16 locations on the Iowa side of the Quad Cities. So that's 6 public libraries, that's Bettendorf, Clinton, and Davenport. Also the LeClaire Community Library, Musser Public Library, which is in Muscatine, and Scott County Library System, and they have branches in Bluegrass, Buffalo, Durant, Eldridge, Princeton, and Waukett. Or Waukett? I don't know.
It depends on if you're from there or not.
Okay.
Then it's Wocket.
The 3 community college libraries are Clinton Community College, Muscatine Community College, and then Scott Community College. So those are the member libraries today. In terms of governance, authority of Rivershare is through intergovernmental agreements in accordance with Iowa Code Chapter 28E. That's what gives us the authority to do this. And then governance is through established bylaws and standing rules that are administered by an assembly of the whole that's comprised of the authorized representatives of the member libraries. So that basically is the library directors of each of those libraries. The assembly of the whole meets at least quarterly, and they may form ad hoc committees if they want. The chairperson is filled on a rotating basis alphabetically. So I'm going to be the chair for fiscal year 25 just because Davenport comes after whichever one Clinton community college was before that. Yep. There's also a secretary who's appointed by the chairperson and then a treasurer. And the treasurer is the director of the Scott County Library System. So Scott County is the fiscal agent of the consortium. And that person is Tricia Kane, who does a really great job of managing the finances for the consortium overall. All Rivershare AOW meetings are conducted in compliance with the Iowa Open Meetings Law as well. So in terms of committees, there are 4 standing committees that manage various aspects of the ILS. So the first one is the Circulation Committee. That consists of 3 people. For the library, Steph Marvin, our Customer Services Supervisor, serves on that committee. And that committee is responsible for the patron database, resource sharing, and then reciprocal borrowing. The ILS Admin Committee is kind of the biggie outside of the AOW committee. And that consists of 8 people. Meredith Willett, our Technical Services Supervisor, serves on that committee. And they're responsible for the administration of the ILS. So they handle ILS admin support, help desk tickets for many of the libraries, and they're also the primary point of contact with the vendor for any issues, updates, upgrades, all that stuff. The Information PAC Committee, PAC is Public Access Catalog. That consists of 4 people. Valerie Farrar is our Information Services Supervisor. She serves on that committee. And that committee is responsible for the online catalog, which is currently a product called Vega Discover. And that was launched in January of last year. And the final committee is Tech Services Committee. That consists of 3 people. Meredith also is on that committee. They're responsible for bibliographic control, records and database. There's also a database subcommittee that provides assistance with cataloging for the small libraries and maintains the bibliographic holdings for all of the libraries. In terms of fees, member fees are based on a complicated formula, as you can see from the graphic. It's the number of items borrowed, so the circulation, the number of registered card holders or our patrons, the number of items in the collection, which is our books, et cetera, and the number of participating libraries. So it's essentially 25% of each is what we come up with that number. So for the upcoming fiscal year, for Davenport Public Library, that's going to come to $46,112 for us to be a member of Rivershare. Those member fees are then used to cover the cost of the ILS and related add-ons, such as phone notification service, after-hours calls for service, that sort of thing. For reference, if we were to go on our own, if we were to splinter off and do our own ILS and just run our own system, that would probably cost us about $150,000 to do it on our own. So there's substantial savings by collaborating, not to mention the loss of resource sharing that we have between area libraries. We get a lot out of this for sure, and all the libraries do. In terms of policies, no policies that are established by Rivershare can be in conflict with any policy established by the governing authority of a member library. So as you can imagine, that leads to a lot of collaboration and some necessary concessions. However, the end result is always a more consistent and a better experience for library users in all of the communities. And what that means is essentially Rivershare won't establish a policy that is in contrast with a board-approved policy by the Library Board of Trustees. Member libraries do affirm a patron confidentiality statement. It stresses the importance of protecting patron privacy. It also supports the ALA policy on confidentiality of patron records and acknowledges Iowa Code Chapter 22.7, which addresses confidential records. In terms of ownership of the records, Rivershare Libraries owns the bibliographic database, and the member libraries own their own item and patron records. So in compliance with the library's confidentiality and privacy policy, which we mentioned earlier, the library director is technically the legal records custodian of those records. In the event of a cyber attack or a hack or anything like that, each member library is individually responsible for any breach or violation of the confidentiality requirements by the member libraries. The software vendor, Innovative, they maintain what's called ISMS. It's an information security management system, and it's based on an international standard, which is ISO IEC 27001. And that's basically the international standard to manage information security, cybersecurity, and privacy protection. And so conformity with that standard means that an organization or business has put in place a system to manage those risks that are related to the security of data owned or handled by the company, and that system is expected to follow best practices and principles that are listed in that ISO standard. So it's pretty robust. They're an international corporation, and so they have even higher standards in, let's say, the European Union that they might have here, and those carry over. So they do a pretty good job of maintaining security of those. And data is encrypted and backed up as well. So membership in Rivershare does allow the public and community college libraries in Iowa Quad Cities to share resources, labor, and responsibilities across multiple organizations to help reduce cost and then save time. There are workflow efficiencies that result in better service to the public and a more seamless patron experience. So what do we get? We get the Polaris, and again, that's the ILS. And Polaris includes several modules that we use to do our job. And that's acquisitions, cataloging, circulation, discovery, serials, and administration. Part of Polaris is Leap. That's a web-based light version of Polaris. It's really helpful with outreach because it allows us to use the laptop. And we can register card holders will work out, which is really great. Yeah, we also have access to overdrive through that as well. And then the last slide. We take a leadership role. Oh my gosh. Oh, no. So I guess that's it. We do a really great job. Our team does a really great job. In particular, Meredith, Jason, Valerie for our department. They serve on a lot of teams. We are one of the leaders. We're the largest library. We have the most patrons, the most card holders. We take a leadership role on that consortium. And our team does a really great job of helping some of the smaller libraries and just leading the way and doing just a really good job overall. Okay, so that's Rivershare Libraries. Questions?
So you said it costs like $46,000?
Yeah, just under $50,000 a year.
Okay. Seeing as how you don't have any line items that are really huge, which one does that fall under? It's not salaries, so.
It's handled in the software
Okay.
expenses.
So in what I heard you say, and maybe I got this wrong, in addition to sharing with each other resources or whatever, you also, it gives you access, your group purchasing softwares and other things to do the work, is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So for example, like Overdrive, which is how we access our ebooks, we have a shared platform for that. So the costs are distributed evenly among all of us. And then we buy ebooks that are added to it, and then other libraries buy ebooks that are added to it. So it increases the number of items that are in that collection for all of our users, which is really great.
I noticed I put a request for hold on a book, and it wasn't in the system, and about a month later, it miraculously showed up, so.
Okay.
I got another one in there I haven't seen show up yet.
That's a good point too, Joe. What I didn't mention was Mobius. I want to mention Mobius because that's a kind of not necessarily underutilized, but maybe a lesser known service that we provide. So within the catalog, if you search for items, it's searching for all items in Davenport Public Library, our collections, plus all the member libraries. If you don't find an item, or if you want to carry that search over, you can click on a button, click or tap on a button called Mobius. That'll take you to a different catalog, which is more libraries. Then that's how we handle our interlibrary loan system.
Yeah.
So it's an even bigger scope. So we're going to be able to get access to a bunch of those area libraries, all the way from Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas up.
Really?
And then before also there was Prospector, which got us into Colorado and some of the other locations as well. So it increases the scope from having 1 million items, 250,000 or 500,000 items for us, to then 1 million items for Rivershare to 2+ million Mobius. So just a whole lot more options for the public. One other thing to note about Mobius too is they're in the process of doing a transition. So they're going to a new software system. And what that means is that Mobius is going to be out of service for us and for our patrons for about 30 days. And that'll start out mid-April or so. And there will be information shared with patrons, including information in the catalog as well.
Yeah, our daughter was looking for some book and couldn't find it anywhere in our system. And so I said, well, just click on that Mobius thing. You know, she did. She ended up getting this thing. It took some time, but it was like from, I don't know, some other state far away. And she's like, wow, there it is.
Yeah. And typically for the resource sharing, it takes, just a couple of days usually to get an item to us. If we do go out to Mobius, it might take 7 to 10 business days or so typically. Sometimes it might take upwards of a month or so, but it depends because we're borrowing from elsewhere and it takes a little bit of time sometimes.
Sure. Subject to their own holds, I'm sure. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Not an entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a tour.
Oh, yeah, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you everyone for your time.